I will see you guys in the dark.
This happened about 2 years ago when I was at my boyfriend's apartment. He has about 3 roommates at the time. We all had previously worked together and were friends, though I lived in the dorms at my college. At the time, my boyfriend and I were alone at the house. He had the day off, and I was visiting him on a free day from school. His roommate's dog started whining, clearly wanting to go outside to go to the bathroom. For reasons I forget, I offered to take the dog out for a small walk around the complex. The area my boyfriend's apartment was in wasn't the worst, but also wasn't the best, but I had felt safe enough to walk the dog around by myself, especially because it was broad daylight outside, and the fact that I was wearing a big sweatshirt, some shorts, hair undone, thrown up in a sad attempt at a bun, with my large glasses on. I usually never get any attention anyway, so I really didn't expect to be getting any with the lazy outfit I was fashioning. As I was walking the dog to a more grassy area, I walk past the dumpster where a guy is standing. I acknowledge him, but leave him to his business. As I pass him, he says, "Ah, I like your dog. What breed is he?" and comes up to pet the dog. If you've ever have had a pet before, this isn't a suspicious interaction and is very common. I put a friendly smile on my face and said, "Oh, I think a Chihuahua mix. It's my friend's dog." After he stopped petting the dog, I go to continue my walk, only he's following me. This has never happened to me before, so I understand if you think my next actions are really stupid. He walks faster to come up next to me, and he's trying to continue the conversation about dogs. I'm trying to be polite, but I'm starting to get nervous. My stomach drops when he asks where I live. I try to stay calm and act like it didn't bother me. I say, "Oh, I don't live here. I'm visiting my boyfriend." At this moment, I turn to my boyfriend's apartment, both to insinuate how close he is, and measuring how far I've walked so far. He says, "Oh, I'm here helping my uncle move in. I bet your boyfriend wouldn't like me talking to you." I try and nervously laugh, but I'm realizing I need to get the hell out of this situation. But I don't want to just freak out and run. I don't know this guy. I don't know if he has anything on him that could hurt me. I realize that I thankfully have my phone on me. I start walking to a patch of grass for the dog to walk into. Before I can get there, the guy tells me to stay for a second. We're in an area of the complex that is next to some stairs. The grass is literally right in front of me, but I freeze like an idiot. Again, I've never been in this situation, and apparently I had the survival skills of a peanut. He sits on the stairs and says, "Now your boyfriend can't see us," and plays it off as a joke. He starts talking, but I can't really focus on what he's saying, as I'm trying to find a way to leave the situation without me getting hurt. I'm scared if I try to run or pick up my phone, he'll try to restrain me or hurt me in some way. I figure I need to try and be calm and nonchalant. I say, "Hey, I need to go. The dog really has to go to the bathroom, and I need to get back to my boyfriend. He doesn't seem to fight back against my request," until he stands up. He says, "Well, can I have a hug goodbye?" before I can respond. He's wrapping his arms around me, pushing me up against the cement wall behind me. He's forcibly putting his crotch up against me, and like the idiot I am, I tense and freeze. I'm so terrified, as I realize how bad the situation I am truly is. I didn't try and get away now. Something terrible is going to happen to me. I try to sound more stern, but it comes out in a pathetic, "I really need to go see my boyfriend." Thankfully, by the grace of God, he lets go and backs away. All he says is, "I'm sorry," and waves goodbye before he begins to walk off. I walk into the grassy area I intended to go, shaking. At this point, I can see the area of the complex where my boyfriend is, but not directly the apartment. I get my phone out, call my boyfriend, and begin heading back to the house, looking around and behind me with every step. I tell my boyfriend to get out here now that something happened, and I was scared. He asked what happened, but I was afraid of that guy. Again, I was worried he had some type of weapon on him. If I told my boyfriend, he would immediately come out and try to beat that guy's ass. and I was terrified my boyfriend would get hurt. The guy was around my height, 5'6", and my boyfriend stands at a good 6'2" and is built, so he could have beaten the guy's ass. But again, that guy seemed fucking crazy. I didn't want to risk the guy having some type of weapon he could pull out. My boyfriend runs outside to me. He walks with me, and we let the dog do its business, and we head inside. The whole time I'm looking around like a maniac, terrified that guy would pop up out of nowhere. We get back inside of the house, and I finally tell my boyfriend the situation. Just like I predicted, he gets up to go out and beat the guy's ass. I beg him not to because I was terrified of him getting hurt, and he finally settles down and comforts me. After that, I saw the guy one more time weeks later. My boyfriend and I were heading to my car to run an errand when a truck drives past. There in the passenger seat, the guy is looking out the window staring at me. He smiles and waves before the truck pulls off. It really gave me the creeps. I felt sick. I never saw him again, but I still look over my shoulder anywhere I go. Even if you think it's safe to walk around, there are weirdos out there. It doesn't matter what you wear, or the time of day, they may still come after you. I never walked around the complex alone after that. I made terrible decisions in this situation that could have gotten me really hurt because I was young and naive. Despite this, it's been a couple years and I've learned from this experience. I won't put myself in that same position again. And to the guy who followed me, terrified me, and was an overall creep. Back in late 2023, I began seeing a man in my neighborhood walking his dog. I would see him in the morning when I went to work, maybe 2 or 3 times a week. He an average-looking guy, maybe in his 60s. I would see him again regularly when I came home. Since I worked in 8 to 5, I didn't think much of it. Just assumed we had similar schedules. He always wore the same blue jacket, didn't think much of it because it looked like a rain or wind jacket, so I thought it was just what he threw on to walk the dog. He would stare a lot when he walked by, but again, assumed maybe he was a lonely guy and didn't think too much of it. One day I asked him if he had got the end-of-year letter from the Hoa and he seemed confused. I repeated myself, and he said he hadn't received anything yet. Wrote this off as well, BC. I assumed he was caught off guard. I had been seeing him daily for months, but we never spoke. He genuinely seemed shocked by me speaking to him. I told him to keep a lookout for it, and he just stared and went back to walking his golden retriever. I began seeing him even more after this. By Christmas, I was seeing him at least once a day, if not twice. I treated him like every other neighbor, and did a quick neighbor wave when I saw him walking his dog. In March, I separated from my husband. He moved out and took the dog. Since I was now alone and sad, my mom stayed with me a while. She doesn't work, so she would be at my house during the day while I was gone. She noted the same guy always walking by. She noticed he always stared too, and it was kind of odd. She waved hello to him a few times, but he never did anything but stare and walk his dog. She said, since he walked the dog often, but also seemingly on a schedule, he could have early onset dementia, or maybe sick somehow and using the dog walks as a way to get exercise. We agreed he was very odd, but harmless. After a month or so, my mom went back to her house and I was living alone. One thing I loved about that house was the fact that the backyard butted up to a national park. Beyond my fence was trees and forest. After my husband left, I would be sitting in the backyard and hear what sounded like footsteps. It was almost always late at night when I'd be sneaking out for a late night cig before bed. I was drinking a good amount at the time, so I figured one. I was paranoid too. I was probably hearing raccoons or opossums in the woods, and 3, having the dog before would have scared off any critters. It didn't happen every night, far enough apart that I was able to write it off. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. My fence had horizontal planks, rather than your more standard vertical style. There were gaps you could see through if you were right on it. I looked over the fence in the daylight for a sign of anyone back there. The national forest kept fire break cleared between the edge of the park and the back of homeowners' property, so it was difficult to tell if anyone had been there or not. I started noticing lighters and cigarettes missing from the backyard. I would swear I had an almost full pack going to bed, but when I'd check the next day, it would be half empty. I wrote this all off due to my heavy drinking. My cousins started coming over and helping me do some handiwork around the house on the weekends. The neighbor guy in the blue coat would walk his dog every day still. He would now stop and watch my cousins from the sidewalk as they did work at the house. He would let the leash out for the dog to come up to them, but they didn't pet it because it smelled awful. I told them the theory my mom said, that he was sick and weird and harmless. They didn't agree, and the next time he let the dog into the driveway, my cousins told him to fuck off. From what they told me, he just stared at them for a while, then walked off. From then the man would still stare, but it was even creepier. When I would drive by, he would stop and watch me, as in physically turn his body to follow my car as I went by. I would wave as if it were any other neighbor, as I always did, and he didn't flinch. Around June, a friend of mine moved in. She was going through a divorce as well, and I was happy to have someone to hang out with after work. We had a lot of fun drinking and burning fires in the fire pit. And it began again. The sound of footsteps in the woods. We were both drunk, so we ran inside and laughed it off. This happened a handful of times over the next few months. I would hear things more often when I was alone. My roommate split her time, so she was never with me on the weekend. She had noted the creepy guy with his dog. He seemed to be walking his dog when I left for work. And again when she was leaving for work, he would let his dog out to her daily, and she would pet the dog at first. She stopped because the dog smelled so bad, and the man never spoke. He just stared. She started being creeped out too. She said he seemed friendly enough until she stopped petting his dog and his stares shifted to being mean too. He began stopping to watch her drive by as well. Then one day I saw it. I saw him down out past the entrance of the neighborhood and at the tree line to the forest. He was clearly walking into the woods. That's when it clicked. Oh, why he wore the same clothes every day. Why he seemed to be there with his dog every day we left the house. Why they smelled so bad. Why I was hearing things in the woods. I almost began to panic. Surely a man isn't living in the woods watching me? Surely this man hasn't been watching me through my fence for almost a year at this point. The whole time this was happening, the house next door was empty. It was a rental and the previous tenants left, and it sat. I started thinking back and I began seeing the man sometime after the previous tenants moved out. I tried best not to panic and started looking into trail cameras to film behind my fence. I told my roommate about my theory, and she said I sounded crazy at first. She jokingly started yelling out for him to go away and leave us alone. Then we literally started hearing footsteps in the woods at that moment and ran inside. Before I could even order a camera, they rented the house next door. It was just days after I told my roommate what I thought was going on. A family with a dog and 2 kids moved in. The last time I saw the man walking his dog was the morning the family moved in because I came home from work to see the moving truck. When I introduced myself to the new neighbors, I asked about the woods behind the house. They didn't have a fence. I asked if they found anything back there, and they said they did, but it was just random junk they threw out. I didn't say anything more. I contemplated telling them, but figured I would sound insane. I believe this man was living behind their house and watching me through my fence. I never had cameras in the backyard, so I can't say for certain if he ever crossed the fence. Since I never saw him again, I decided his cover was blown and he moved on to watch other people. I stayed in that home until October 2025. Literally never saw the guy ever again after that day. When I was in elementary school, maybe 4th or 6th grade, my friend's mom drove us to visit her grandma. It was about 45 minutes to an HR from our town. We drove there with my friend, my age, her little brother, and my sister. About 1 block from her grandma's house was a kid's playground. From her grandma's front door, you couldn't see the park, but you could see the entrance to it. The playground entrance was placed in between rows of houses right against the neighborhood street. Touching the far end of the playground was a bike path. On the other side of the bike path was a cornfield. Turning right and following the bike path, it continued into a forest preserve. Houses' backyards lined up along the bike path with a row of fences. Between their fences and the bike path was about 12 to 15 feet wide section of corn that stretched along the bike path until the forest preserve. It felt like a pretty normal suburban neighborhood. like kids did in the late 90s or early 2000s. Me, my sister, friend, and her brother walked over to the park to play by ourselves. We were having a good time, playing the usual park games, etc. I saw cars drive by and didn't think much of it. But then I remember noting a large black van that drove by. I can't remember if it was a service van or a minivan, but I remember something feeling off, and I became more vigilant of the cars driving by. We continued to play. I was standing furthest from the street that is closest to the bike path. My sister, friend, and brother were fairly close to the street. Suddenly, the black van approached again and stopped right in front of the park. I still remember it as if it happened yesterday. It felt like time slowed down. 5 people dressed in black got out of the van. The van drove away. They were wearing all black with black ski masks on. There was at least 1 or 2 women, and the rest were male. One of males pointed right at me and yelled, "That's the one we want. Let's get her." Then they all started running past my friend, her little brother, and my sister and ran right towards me. When I heard those words, I began running on the bike path as fast as I could. I jumped into the corn that stretched between the houses and bike path. I laid down on the ground. I covered my mouth and didn't move a muscle. I heard them turn the corner and were now on the bike path. One of them yelled, "I bet she ran down the bike path. She probably isn't far. We'll get her." I was terrified. I laid there as still as I could until I heard no one. I was afraid to return to the park in case the van was back. Through the corn I assessed the fence and decided my only chance was to jump the fence. It was a large, maybe 5 or 6 foot fence. I knew that once I did, I would be closer to her grandma's house, and could see her front door from that house's front yard. I stood up as quietly as I could. I jumped over it and ran through the yard. My sister and friend were near the front of that house, and we went back to her grandma's. I was so upset. My sister believed me. My friend thought I was making it up, and it must have just been older kids having fun. Her brother was too young to know. I don't remember if I told her mom. I was 5 at the time, and luckily my parents explained to me at an early age not to get into a car with strangers. I was outside, if I remember correctly, and I was running around playing outside, doing things a normal 5-year-old would. And my parents were outside building a fence, so they were in the backyard while I was in the front, and a car pulled up, a red car. I don't know how I still remember what color. There was a man and a woman inside, and the man pulled up to my sidewalk, and keep in mind, I have a fair-sized front yard, so it's not like he could jump out and grab me. Anyways, he pulled up and rolled down his window, and I think he asked if I was lost or needed a ride or something like that. And even if I was only 5, alarms still went off in my head and I didn't even say anything. I just turned around and ran to the backyard where my parents were. I'm pretty sure my older brothers were back there as well. And by the time I told them what had happened, the car had already sped away. And I'm pretty sure that car drove past our house for a few years before stopping. Yes, it happened a long time ago. But if it ended differently, I could be dead or worse. This happened a couple of years ago. I lived in a suburb of a big city and was visiting my boyfriend's office at the time. When we pulled into the small lot, there was a young man who appeared to be 16 to 27 years old, with a small backpack and penny board, standing under the shade outside. Since it was a fairly small complex, you didn't see new people often. We caught eyes and something about his gaze was unsettling. But my boyfriend and I continued walking into his office. We talked about it briefly when we got in, and he said maybe he was avoiding the sun, made light of it, and then we left back out to go get coffee. When we came back about 15 or 20 minutes later, I wholeheartedly expected him to be gone because when we pulled up, I didn't see him. Honestly, I was very relieved. However, when I walked through the front door, there he was again. This time sort of crouched, hiding behind what was the front door of the office, a fully see-through plexiglass door. So it was understandably an odd place to hide behind, because anyone passing by could see him. And when I rediscovered him, I screamed and sort of visibly jumped because I have trauma, and to be honest, he scared me. Something about his face when I screamed really creeped me out, and it felt like he wanted to scare me, or someone who passed by, on purpose, almost like a twinkle in his eye. I started to get really creeped out by now, but I wasn't fully convinced it was all in my own head, because my boyfriend was minimizing it. I decided to test a theory. When my boyfriend and I got back to his office, I knew I'd have to pee because I have a small bladder. I knew, unfortunately, the crazy guy who saw me go with him to his office would see because the hallway isn't that long. If he really was crazy, he'd follow me and my boyfriend would see it. And that would be the end of it. Or so I thought. Plus I always have to pee anyways, so there was really no other option. So I let my boyfriend know I have to pee. I tell him to keep the office door open and to keep an eye out. I explain my concern, and then I run to the bathroom. As soon as I get into the bathroom and bolt the lock and plop onto the toilet, I get the weirdest sinking feeling I've ever felt to this day. I suddenly just know that when I finish using the bathroom, I will have to run out of this restroom for my life. I have no idea how I know this, but I just know. I also have a secondary thought as I'm finishing up, that I'm going to have to call the police on this man afterwards, and I don't know why, because I literally haven't heard anything outside the door. But I can feel one. Run to safety then too. Call 911. So I mentally prep. I take some deep breaths. And then I swing the door open and he is right fucking there. And I scream bloody murder to the point that I think I scared him because he jumped back, and I booked it. The look on his eyes when I first opened the door, scream however, told me he was planning to push me back into the restroom and then lock the door. If I hadn't been paying attention, I think that's what his plan was. Obviously, I can't be sure, but IDK, I've been assaulted before, and there's a certain look those kinds of people get in their eyes. Their eyes turn all black. I run, all the while screaming, to my boyfriend's office and swing the door closed, and lock it, and tell him to call 911. He doesn't believe me, and neither do the officers until they finally arrive, and they see the man is still hunched behind the glass door at the front. He didn't even leave the scene. Just stayed there waiting. The police said he had a warrant for his arrest, specifically for something sexual assault related. So they take him away. I chewed my then BF out for months, because how did he miss that? And also not believe me? And to the violent sexual offender who likely tried to push me into a bathroom to do God knows what. This happened a few years ago. I think it was in 2014. I'm a writer, and I have done some stuff on YouTube. But in my early years, I was trying what I could to get a job in TV and movies. I was trying to make contacts and meet people in the industry in the hope they would make one of my movie scripts. I came across this one guy on the internet who had a page online introducing himself as a movie producer, who was based in my neck of the woods of Manchester, England. His profile mentioned he had made a bunch of movies. I was pretty young and gullible, so I contacted him, and he seemed really interested to meet me and discuss working together. We had a video call, but he said his camera wasn't working, so I was on screen, but I could only hear his audio. He wanted to meet me face to face, so he arranged to meet me at some cafe in a pretty rundown part of town. I finally met him, and we sit down at the cafe. He was short, fat, wore black, and wore a baseball cap. We started talking about movies, and what movies we like, with the few people I had spoken to previously in the film industry. Usually these people will know a lot about films, and have their finger on the pulse of what's just come out, and what is just about to come out, that they are looking forward to. But when I asked this guy what movies he was into, he only talked about the Hangover movie, which was a comedy that came out about 5 years earlier. I tried to probe him more about what else he was into, but that was it. The Hangover. I then asked him about the films that he had made. He said, "Yeah, sure." He then claimed that he had made a movie called For Ireland, which was apparently an action movie that ended with the Irish nuking London. He said he also had worked with Steven Seagal. But I had a feeling like the guy was just full of shit. I shook hands with him, promising to stay in touch and work with him in the future. But in my head, I realized he wasn't the real deal, and he came across as a little odd. I tried to look the guy up online afterwards, but couldn't find any evidence of his films. There was no movie called For Ireland, and still to this day, no movie has ever been made called that. Looking back now, I realize he was basically just making up crap on the spot, which kind of makes me laugh, looking back. After that, he started to text me about wanting to speak to me again. He said that he had just finished constructing a giant movie studio, which is weird because the guy looked like he didn't have a pot to piss in. When we were in the cafe, he didn't even buy anything. He then kept asking me to come round to his new movie studio so he could show me around, saying, "I really want to show you something." I ignored him, but it creeps me out thinking that he would try and get someone else to come visit him at his studio and the creepy things he might do. Unfortunately, I don't remember his name, but not sure if anyone else came across this creepy character in Manchester years ago.